Hi, I'm Amy BOUTON, Public Information Officer for St. Tammany Parish Government. We're here today to give a brief update on the COVID-19 situation, and we've been bringing you mental health updates from Nick Richard from NAMI St. Tammany, Executive Director of NAMI St. Tammany, and Nick is kind enough to join us again today to talk about mental health during the COVID-19 pandemic. So welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
Thank you for coming back in. And we've been exploring a lot of topics over the past few weeks regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and the stressful sort of situation it is for some. For most, it's different, it's new. None of us have ever been through this before. And we want to talk today about the impacts we're seeing in the business community and some of the stressors that entrepreneurs, business owners, even people helping to facilitate resources and sort of make the resources available to the business community, some of the stressors and impacts that might be having on these this segment of the population. So can we kind of talk about, from a mental health standpoint, what you might be hearing from the community, what you might be seeing in the business community as far as how this is impacting individuals and business owners and workers and people who are helping the business community?
Definitely. So, when we talk about mental health, oftentimes we look at subcategories, of individuals, and we're looking for patterns and different types of things. So, kind of jumping over to a subcategory, people who are either involved in businesses or work at businesses, right, or employed or employees or employers, make up probably one of the largest subpopulations of citizens in the United States. So, you would then say that they're one of the hardest impacted areas, in our country. So, again, there's many different things to look at. There's the perspective from the employee, the perspective from management, and the perspective from owners. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different things that they have to consider. From a management perspective or an ownership perspective, with this virus, it's pretty easy to articulate and put together what we need to do to eliminate barriers to catching this, right? So the physical things out there, we know we need to wash our hands, right? We need to physically distance, coughing into our elbows. All those things are out there. They're all readily available, and they're universal. So these are universal things that everybody can do. So if you own a company or you're in management in a company, this is easy to pass along to your employees.
Sure.
The psychological impacts, it doesn't work the same way, right? Because every individual is different and they're impacted in a different way. Mm-hmm. So the approach is not only, much more complicated, it's more time intensive. So if you want, I can kind of jump into, what companies can do, what employees are looking at, what they're concerned with, and how to address those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want to talk about that. And we also want to talk about, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this too, how the owners are coping, because a lot of, like we kind of talked about this a little bit before, and we were talking about how business owners are people with lives. So men, women, young adults, the senior population, all of those age groups could be in that category. And so they're managing their business life, but then they're also managing their personal life. So while we're all facing stressors from all sides, we're just going to kind of zoom in on that today. So let's talk about the employees and managing the employees from a psychological perspective.
Right. And with any relationship, because an employee to employer relation, it's a relationship, right? Just like, a marriage, just like a parent to a child relationship, it's a relationship. And one of the most important things in a relationship is communication, right? And this is, on some of the other times that I've come on, we've talked about helping out your children and helping out adolescents and helping everybody else out. And clear communication in leadership has been almost number one every time. So the first thing that employers really need to focus on, and I'm sure they have, were honestly the people that you're laying off first, if that had to happen. Mm-hmm. So the people that are being let go or laid off need to be the very first focus, to be able to give them resources, give them everything they can, because that's also going to reflect to the employees that you do have. That's going to impact them as well, and it's certainly going to show the community what type of organization you are.
Right.
And then obviously, after you've looked at those employees and try to do everything you can for those employees, then comes the staff that are there, right? So communicating what your business operation is and how it's going to change is going to be extremely important, because look, everybody's concerned about, am I still going to have a job, right? And then they go from, okay, well, how am I going to do my job? And then they go for, oh my gosh, how am I doing my job with my kid in the background while school just got canceled, while, I don't have all these other supports, and maybe my significant other just lost their job, right? So how am I going to be able to do this? All that stress is going to come back, and it's going to decrease productivity. So there are things that you can do in management or as an owner in order to help decrease that stress. And again, communication and transparency is going to be the number one thing that you can do for your employees. And it has to keep happening. Think back the plan that you guys had 4 weeks ago is different than the plan that you have now. Right? Because as things change, and as we get updated regulations from the CDC, our plans change. And that's okay, as long as we're openly and transparently communicating this to our employees. And with that same thought, we need to be flexible, right? What I believe the rest of this week is going to bring us, because again, I manage people as well, may change next week, right? Based on the information that we get from our government officials. So again, communicate, be transparent, and be flexible. These are going to be three of the main things that we need to do.
And I guess that there's a commonality there that probably isn't always there between a manager and an employee at this point, because we're all going through some of the same things together.
Yeah, and that's also a good thing to communicate, because, and I've kind of talked about that as well when we're talking about anxiety and some of these feelings of depression and all that. And the message you want to convey first, from your company is safety is the number one importance. It is the number one important. Look, generally the number one goal of business is to stay in business, and you have to do that by selling product, making money. Right now, the number one goal needs to be safety and taking care of our employees, because without a healthy workforce, you don't have a company. Right. So that needs to be conveyed. People need to feel as though the company is there and they actually care about their health and well-being, because there are a lot of legitimate concerns out there. The second thing is really to recognize, as you stated, to point out, look, we're all in this together. So we're all in this together with the shared goal of minimizing struggle and ultimately loss, right? That's what we're doing. Right. And that's going to go a long way towards decreasing anxiety and increasing productivity for individuals. So, these are things that are universal, right? So companies really, I guess if I were to put it in one little line, should have a policy of open and even vulnerable communication, which is not always natural, right? Right,
especially because in business, right?
I manage people as well. I have probably spent, as a manager, more time speaking one-on-one and checking in on my employees and communicating with them than I have in my entire career, right? Because that's what we need to do in management right now. We need to ensure that we understand that everybody's an individual and they're all going to respond things differently. And we need to just put a little bit more time into that. I've got some other little tips and some other ways that we can help, especially because most of us have shifted to remote work that I can get into in a second if you'd like.
And well, let me ask you a follow-up question, because when you were talking about checking in with your employees and making sure they're okay, for the person who's doing the checking in, the manager or the owner, I would imagine that is helpful to them as well, to know that, yes, their employees are doing well, or they're not doing well, and look, I'm going to step in to help you. So does that, would you say that kind of is a benefit for both, and that can help ease some of the tension for the manager or the owner as well, doing that?
I think it's a yes and no, right? On the one hand, to be realistic, on the one hand, yes, of course, you're building a better relationship with your employee. It also gives you a good pulse of your company, and that obviously is going to decrease your stress to feel that everyone's going strong and everything's going well, right? Right. That's on the yes side. On the no side, we have to be realistic about this as owners and managers. Yeah. There's an additional level of stress, right? Because we're also taking time away from our regular duties in order to sink more time into communicating with our employees, which obviously builds up more work on management. Yes. Right. So you just need to, one of the biggest things we talk about is really taking the time to reflect on how you feel. I know it sounds, all touchy-feely and all that, but you need to be connected to how you're feeling, right? And really process how you're feeling. So there are times for me where I'm like, okay, I think I pushed it too hard, right? I need to sit back and go, am I a little more agitated right now? And why am I a little more agitated? Because I've had to basically handle, everything that's been thrown at me from every employee at this organization. And if so, then maybe I just need to go take a little 30-minute break and just get away from all this. So it's really even more important for managers or owners to be mindful of how they're feeling, because again, when you're in leadership, if you're there to shape and model good behavior as well. You're there to lead. People are going to follow what you do. So on the one hand, you're right, Amy, it's actually really helpful and maybe even more helpful in the long term of building relationships with your employees with this level of communication. But we also have to remember they've lost some level of communication. I can tell you from my wife, for example, right? She's been working with some of her coworkers for, more than a decade.
Right.
They talk more than her and I talk. That's part of her family.
Right.
And that's been removed from her, right? So she's not able to have that daily communication, that camaraderie with her coworkers. So supervisors need to sometimes fill in a little bit of that void, and that's going to really help down the line with productivity and certainly with the relationships between managers and employees.
Well, that is the good, you brought up some good points about how it does impact the person doing the checking in. And we've heard this a lot. Sort of what came to mind for me is self-care, which we've heard a lot. And that kind of spills over into what you were talking about, how you work remotely in a healthy way. So did you want to just briefly touch on working remotely?
Yeah, and that gets, I know for us, it was probably like most companies, it was fast and hectic, right? I mean, nobody was really, if you planned for this, good on you. I mean, you are the model of a company. But I think most companies, we had some aspect of planning to work remotely, but I don't know that most people had the ability to go remotely in the timeline that we went remotely, right? And had the time to test this and work on the bugs. We're building this ship as we're sailing it. So communication again is the key to doing that, ensuring that you have one of the biggest concerns that employees have, obviously not having a job, contracting this virus, but having access to updated technology and equipment in order to communicate. So number one, make sure that we're all communicating. As we're talking right now, Zoom is a free thing. There are many other apps and other ways to communicate out there, but this visual communication that we have is gonna decrease the anxiety a little bit. And you also need to remember, employees and people in general, we're social creatures. Like I said, we've had these long-lasting relationships with some of our coworkers, and they're being removed. Right. So as a manager, you're going to have to just accept and allow and maybe foster a little bit more non-work communication. So it's okay if people get on, take a lunch break together. It's okay if they take a few extra breaks, because that's going to go a long way towards keeping the anxiety down, keeping the productivity up. And another tip is don't let hard work go unseen. You got to remember, like if I'm, again, in management, I see my employees every day. They're outside my office. They're all down the hall here.
Right.
Well, I don't see them right now. It's just me here. There's no one here, just me. So the employees start to feel like, maybe my supervisor doesn't believe I'm working as hard, right? Because they don't see me working as hard. That starts to bring in doubt. That starts to bring in anxiety, and that's going to decrease productivity. One of the tips that we use for that is, look, take maybe every other week and highlight an employee. Send it out on an email, put it up on the website, put something out, an employee that's going above and beyond, right? And, that's going to decrease, it's going to bring everybody together, right? It's also going to, make people feel valued and welcome. And again, look, there's a lot of best practices out there for working remotely. We didn't just start working remotely. The large portion of our society recently did, but we've had the ability to work remotely before. So there's a lot of information out there, some really good information on best practices on working remotely. Again, like anything else at home, maintain a routine. I can tell you from my staff, every Monday morning, the entire staff, we do a Zoom call, and I give them the lay of the land. We talk about everything. And one of the other things that we do is we have people bring up concerns that they have, because we work together as a group to address those concerns, and it makes us feel all connected back to what you said earlier, we're all in this together, right? And we can all problem solve this together. When you don't feel like you're isolated and alone, when you feel like you're together, you're going to be more likely to decrease your anxiety. And again, with communication, asking employees what they need, right? Communicating with them, not just in groups like I'm talking about, but I try to take the time to pick a side. It's a lot of work, but I check in with employees that I probably wouldn't even normally check in with, but once a month, I'm talking to them once and twice a week. Right? Because not only do they feel like I'm communicating with them and they feel valued, but they feel in touch because they're not physically here to be in touch. So it's my job to make sure that they're in touch. Again, we're all in this together, having a policy, an open, and like I said earlier, even vulnerable communication. Right? And that is not comfortable in business and management. And I understand that, but this is not a time for that. And look, there are resources, right? So, larger companies and even some of the mid-sized ones, you're going to have EAP programs. They're going to be able to deliver some things. So let's just say, talking to my employee, I'm starting to notice there's some concerns there, right? And it's okay to ask. It's okay to inquire. And if somebody doesn't want to talk about it, then they don't want to talk about it. But you can still send them some other resources, right? You've got EAP programs, right? There are resources there. But, the worst thing you can do is recognize that there are problems and ignore them. That in the end, it's not going to just fix itself. And the other employees are going to see that as well. So it's going to impact your whole company.
So let's kind of wrap it up and talk about just sort of overall what I've gathered, and I hope that our audience is gathering, is that the key to all of this is remembering that this is a collective event. We're all in this together in one way or another. And we need to have open, honest, transparent communication, even when the news isn't the best. So is there anything else you'd like to add to that as far as what we've talked about in a nutshell? Because you've given some really good hands-on type of advice and things people may not have thought of who are in this situation. So is there anything else you'd like to add or any kind of wrap-up you'd like to give?
Definitely. Look, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is completely normal behavior, right? So recognize that, right? I'm not saying everyone's going to be perfect just because you're talking to them and just because you gave them a computer to work from home, right? There are going to be stressors there. One of the things that we're working on, and it's because of this conversation, it's because, again, as pointed out, individuals who are employees or employers are one of the largest subpopulations, in the United States. And it's a unique and different type of relationship than any other subpopulation. So one of the things that we're working on here at NAMI is putting together some handouts. Hopefully we'll have them out by next week, not only for businesses, but also for businesses to hand out to their employees. They're, one of the other little tricks to bring people together, and you're starting to see this a little bit more in social media, especially down here in the South, is companies are getting together and they're either donating or they're trying to help out first line responders, right? Yes. And I've talked about this before. One of the biggest things about all the anxiety that we have is the lack of control and the lack of uncertainty. So the line in my house always is control the world around you, right? So one of the best ways to do that is to be able to not only connect with other people, but to help other people, right? Because now I'm not just sitting here and I'm not a helpless person. I'm somebody who has power, who can help. I bring control back to me. So as a company, you can sign up for something, say, hey, look, we're gonna do a little competition. We're gonna see how much we can get for this, or do a see who can make the best mask. I don't know, but it brings us together, right, and allows us to help other people. So those little things that we've talked about today, all those little things add up to being something big, to helping us weather this storm. And again, as I always kind of say, and I always like to end with, is it's okay not to be okay. Right. This is a very unusual situation that we're not accustomed to. So recognizing that, you're going to feel a little bit different about it is okay, but taking the steps to address how you feel and putting healthy coping mechanisms in place is really going to be the best key. So I guess, again, the end of that is, we're going to put something together as a mental health organization, not only to help businesses, talk to employees about this, but also as resources to the employees to help them cope with this. awareness.
Okay, great. Well, Nick, as always, we appreciate you joining us. You have a wonderful insight, and you always point us in a good direction as far as our own self-care and mental health awareness. And we want to thank you, Nick, for being here. And we want to encourage everyone to go to the NAMI St. Tammany website. We have their link on our website. And whatever resources Nick puts together, we will also share. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. That concludes our update.